David Bell, Jalen Tolbert, Calvin Austin. Ryan Pohl steps in and says, no, give me Velus Jones. Today, we're going to talk about that. We're going to play a little game of verses and try to figure out why Ryan Poles took Velus Jones over some of these other wide receivers. My name is Max Markham. Welcome to the Bear Den. All right, let's put it out there. David Bell, Jalen Tolbert, Velus Jones Jr. It's not as simple just to say that Velus Jones Jr. is the best wide receiver. That's why he was taken. You can't find me an analyst out there that says Velus Jones Jr. is the best. You might be able to find one out of the 1,000 that are out there, but there's not many, that's for dang sure. So let's figure it out. Velus Jones Jr. was the 14th wide receiver taken in this draft. Jalen Tolbert, 15. David Bell, 16. Let's start with David Bell. So David Bell, he ran a 4.65 at his 40-yard dash, ran the 40-yard at his pro day again, and ran a 4.71. He ended up being the 99th player taken overall in the third round. In his system in Purdue, they were in a spread offense. He was the X wide receiver. He consistently put up yards and scored touchdowns, and this was mostly due to a very efficient route running. He outjumped defenders. He has a bit of a basketball background. He's able to high point balls, and he does have strong hands when going up for that catch. In his first year as a freshman, he had 1,000 yards and 9 starts. It's a great start. 7 touchdowns to accompany that. 1,300 yards in his most recent season, and that was in 11 games. 11 games, 1,300 yards, 6 touchdowns, but that also came with 11 drops. He played 33 games over a 3-year college career and had 17 100-yard receiving games, so he was playing pretty well. But ultimately, he's not explosive. He does not have great long speed. He will not have that ability to have that home run speed to outrun cornerbacks, and has average speed when changing directions. He doesn't bring any special teams help as well. So he will be a strict X wide receiver in the NFL, maybe play a little bit inside the slot. Maybe they can switch him up a bit. But he has a really high floor, but unfortunately his athleticism reduces his ceiling. All right, now let's go over Jalen Tolbert. He had offers from some big name schools, but decided to stay in the Sun Belt and go with South Alabama. He ran a 4.49 40-yard dash, and he was drafted in the third round, the 88th pick overall. Just like David Bell, an ex-wide receiver in his offense, in 2021, he had 1,400 yards in 12 games. So yeah, he lit it up, averaging 18 yards per catch. Like, talk about deep threat. 8 touchdowns and then 7 drops. He's a smooth route runner, can at times create separation, and has big catch radius, so he can really rally in some of those catches that are wild throws. He can be a deep threat with his tracking and speed combined. In his final year, we saw his drops increase, but he also had 20 more receptions than any other year. So he's not the biggest yards after carry guy, not the biggest yak guy, and he will not be able to always outrun corners. He goes down easy compared to David Bell and Velus Jones. He doesn't block. If along the sideline, he will not fight for extra yards, and you'll see him pop out of bounds right before the corner touches him. He didn't play very much special teams either, so he won't be bringing that. So now that we've considered what Jalen Tolbert and David Bell are as wide receivers, let's look at Velus Jones and see if we can spot a difference. So Velus Jones Jr., rather than being an X wide receiver like the other two, he's a slot wide receiver, also in a spread offense. In his 13 games in his final year, he had 800 yards receiving, averaging 13 yards per reception, 7 touchdowns, 3 drops. So let me remind you, Jalen Tolbert had 7 drops in his final year. David Bell had 9 drops in his final year. So Velus Jones Jr., 3 drops. And he was commonly used in screens, sweeps, and end arounds. He had multiple 50-yard catches in his career, but he was usually used on short passes, and then they used his yak ability to get through defenders, power through. He's a very strong runner, and to get extra yardage. And once he got to that third level, if he ever got to a point where he was neck and neck with a corner, it was game over. He would outrun the corner and score a touchdown. So I'll link the highlight reel below. He's got some pretty cool touchdown highlights there. Velus Jones Jr. ran a 4.3. He also mentioned that if he ran a straight line, he said, I would have hit a 4.2. And you know what? He may have not been wrong. He was Justin Fields' personal recommendation as they watched film, as apparently he watched film with Ryan Poles. He led the SEC in kick return yards the last 2 years. So not only are you getting a wide receiver who can be a deep threat, you're getting a wide receiver who can do these short to intermediate passes and get you yak yards. The other 2 wide receivers won't be getting you yak. And then he will also be able to take handoffs, and he's got great explosive ability. His ability to accelerate and then get to his top speed is a very quick, way faster than the other 2 wide receivers, and that will allow him to come in and play running back quite often, actually. And there's some analysis that I was reading that said he might even be a better running back. He's going to be one of the best kick returners coming out of college. The best kick returner coming out of college. So Justin Fields is going to have a lot shorter fields to work with. He's going to have a player that will be like Tariq Cohen, play at wide receiver or line up as a running back. But Velus Jones has the ability to block, and he almost reminds me of an Alvin Kamara, which is kind of a weird comparison to be making for a wide receiver. But he is so slippery. He can slip off tackles just like Alvin Kamara. He has a compact frame. He's very strong. He is tough to bring down. And so that is ultimately what the Bears are getting. And people bring up his age, but guess what? Cooper Kupp was a 3rd rounder and was 25 by the start of his rookie year. And guess what? He seems to be doing okay in the NFL. So age obviously doesn't matter, especially when he just finished running a borderline 4.2 40 just a couple months ago. So it's not going to be a huge deal. So that's what the Bears are getting. They're not getting an X wide receiver like they would have gotten with Tolbert and Bell, but they are getting a guy who can play X, can play Z, can play in the slot, can line up at running back, and will be the starting kick returner for the Bears. And that's who they got. So it's more of a system fit than the most talented high floor type of guy. He will be a day 1 starter. So when we look at Kyler Gordon, when we look at Jaquan Brisker, that's what the Bears are going for. Who will be a day 1 starter and create an immediate impact. And you will see Velus Jones with the ball in his hands in different positions in different ways, multiple times throughout each game this season. All right, if you like that side-by-side comparison and if you learned something, I would love if you hit the like button. Thank you so much for making it to the end. I really appreciate that. And we are going to do more highlight videos for the Bears players and offensive linemen coming up, and I'm excited to get into that film and post those highlights for you. So if you want to hit subscribe and see that content in your feed, that would be much appreciated. Again, my name is Max Markham. This is the Bear Den. Bear down.